Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's program, Preserving Family History, the New Jersey Records Preservation Group. I'm Tom Ankner, the director of the Charles F. Cummings New Jersey Information Center at the Newark Public Library. Before we get started, I just wanted to encourage you all to fill out your census forms. Filling out the census is one small but very important thing everyone can do right now to help our city and our communities. If you haven't done so yet, please go to my2020census.gov and fill out the brief questionnaire. The information you provide affects funding for healthcare, transportation, your local schools, and many other needs. Remember, my2020census.gov. It is safe, secure, and confidential. Now, on to our program. Our guest today is Mary Lish, who has been working for years to organize, catalog, and disseminate the records of cemeteries and funeral homes in Essex County. I first met Mary about a decade ago when I attended one of her cleanup days at Woodland Cemetery in Newark. I didn't know it then, but I later learned that I had an ancestor buried there, and Mary was able to provide me with some information from his headstone. Mary, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So I'd like to talk to you about your group, the New Jersey Records Preservation Group. Could you tell me a little bit about it?
Sure.
Yeah.
We are a small group. We've kept it rather small on purpose, just logistically working well together. And we started about a year and a half ago. I'm guessing maybe, well, actually, no, it's probably, maybe it's 2 to 3 years ago now that I'm thinking about it. It just seems like yesterday. It's an interesting story, and I'll give a brief overview of how it started. I liken it to an old wagon wheel. Because of Woodland Cemetery, I knew a lot of people, hundreds of people who I've helped over the years, but I'm kind of like the hub of a wheel. And I had all these wonderful friends, you included, just all these spokes on a wheel. And I realized, one of those light bulb moments, none of them knew each other. I know them all, but none of them knew each other. They all had the similar interests of some sort, And so I said, well, maybe, I wonder if any of them would like to know each other, meet each other. So I said to John Sass, who was my partner in the Woodland endeavor, I said, why don't I throw a dinner? I put out and see if anybody would like to have dinner together at a restaurant. And I said, if we get 2 or 3 couples, and I said they had to bring their partners or spouses because otherwise we'd be the most boring people in the world talking dead people all night. And so I put it out, and inside of 24 hours, we had 18 people coming. They all wanted to come and meet each other. And so we met. It was a fabulous night. I've never heard such chatter in my life. There was no lull in conversation. Everybody talked up a storm, all interested in each other's histories and family histories, helping each other. One found out that they were a Roosin, never knew it, and we have a Roosin expert in our group, Tom Peters. Okay. And so that started that. Well, at the end of the night, they walked out and they said, when's our next meeting? Well, I knew it was born. So from that point, we've been a group ever since then. We just kind of formalized ourselves with a name.
Okay. And what do you do? Talk about what the group actually does.
What we do is we go into cemeteries, mostly cemeteries, funeral homes, and church records. And what we do is we photograph the old records. Some of the records that we're photographing are from the early 1800s. And we're still trying to make inroads into some others, especially funeral homes, because basically there are some funeral homes, they throw out their books. They just, they don't have the space for them. And their family history is written in these books. Cemeteries, it's the same type of situation. The records are getting so old and decrepit, and the writing is fading. So what we're doing is we're going in literally with cameras, whatever we have, we photograph every scrap of paper. That's what we did at Clinton Cemetery in Irvington, which opened in 1844. So we went in and he opened his office to us and he said, photograph anything you want. He opened both safes we photographed every scrap of paper they had, and then we brought it home. And then, of course, the long time process is getting it into a database of some sort so that other people can utilize it.
Mhm. So how do you approach these cemeteries? Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
That's my phone. So how do you approach these cemeteries? I mean, or cemeteries or funeral homes or churches, how do you decide who to approach and how do you go about doing it? Talk about Clinton, for instance.
Well,
how did you approach them?
Well, having Woodland as our anchor, and Woodland has always been our anchor because it was, when we started Woodland, I thought it was going to be a 2-month or 3-month project in order to find my original ancestors. But I said, while I'm there, and I have all the records, why don't I computerize it? So maybe we could help somebody else, a couple people.
Yeah.
Didn't know there was over 80,000 people buried at Woodland. Had no idea it was 35 acres. I mean, we just didn't know. So once we did that, having that as a basis and Newark as our common denominator, other cemeteries knew of us. They knew what we had done because no one would go to Woodland Cemetery.
Yeah.
So, and it got cleaned up for a while, and they're making inroads again. But having that as an experience to say, look what we did, and we can do this for you. I mean, Clinton, for instance, when I approached the president of Clinton Cemetery, Alan Siegel, he was like, absolutely. I mean, he's getting, I mean, you're talking about a group of people who are going to hand him his records computerized for free. We don't charge. We don't charge. We're just a volunteer group. And all the people who are helping me right now, I consider myself one of them. I'm just a volunteer. I kind of am a little bit of an organizer. I organize things, but so far I've had just wonderful experiences. In fact, when I retired 3 years ago, I finally was going to have more time. I did Woodland while I was working full time and living in Connecticut. So that was a bit of a stretch trying to do that. Now I'm retired. I'm living in New Jersey. So I thought, well, let me approach, a few places and maybe I could pick up 1 or 2. To my chagrin, every single person I approached said, absolutely, come in. So now we are inundated with work. I mean, we have incredible amount of work to do, and it's almost hard for me to get it out to enough people to could get it typed up and done.
So you haven't run into any resistance for any cemeteries, any funeral homes, people who don't want to release their records to make them available? You haven't run into that at all?
Not at all.
Surprises me.
Well, and if I could put in a word, this is something that I found fascinating, and I think you and I have talked a little bit about it. The Archdiocese of Newark, I know if anybody has ever had to deal with Holy Sepulchre, they're really at a loss, not a loss. It's very difficult for them because their records are still just being computerized. But if someone ever called them about St. Mary's, they just said, we can't help you because we have the records here, but they're scant. There's not a whole lot of them, and we just can't help you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I approached the Archdiocese of Newark, who most people, it's not a fear, but it's just so big. I mean, how do you approach the Archdiocese of Newark, which includes Hudson County, Essex County, all these counties?
Yeah.
And I called, I was given the name of a gentleman who was the director of the cemeteries. And being the shy person that I am, I picked up the phone and called him.
Yeah.
And I said, do you have any idea what your reputation is? And there was a little hesitancy on the phone, which I can understand. I said, I'm calling because I want to change it. I want to make it a good reputation. And he said, why don't you come down and have lunch with me? I said, holy smokes. So I did. We talked, and I hope all the people who are listening have been on their website, the arcancem.org,
Yeah.
RCANCEM.org site. And I told him, when I go to a cemetery, like Gate of Heaven or Holy Sepulchre or Holy Cross or whatever, and I asked to see who's buried with my grandfather. I'd like a list of the people buried with my grandfather, and they say no. And he says, well, why don't you just go to the tombstone? I said, my grandfather was a poor immigrant. He didn't have a tombstone.
Yeah.
So how do I find out? And this gentleman was, and I say gentleman, truly gentleman, said, "What will you work with my IT people?" I said, "I'd love to." So inside of 2 weeks, and before I had a chance to have a good conversation with this gentleman, the IT person, the director called me back and he said, "Go on the website." And I did. I went on archive. We were on the phone, and he said, "Type in your family name." And I did, and it came up, in their site. And he says, "See the magnifying glass? Click on the magnifying glass." And everybody who was buried with my grandfather came up.
Oh, so they had implemented that.
Inside of 2 weeks, the archdiocese changed everybody's way of getting information. So I just gave them so much credit. And then he said, and I said, "Now what I'd like to do is computerize St. Mary's records." He said, "Okay," and opened up his books to me. So they are doing a marvelous job, just a marvelous job.
And there are two Catholic cemeteries in particular that I wanted to ask you about. There's St. John's Cemetery and St. Mary's, both of which you're working on, right? Now, St. John's Cemetery was where NJ Pack is now, right? It was in downtown Newark?
No, St. John's Cemetery was on Mulberry Street. It's, the brownstone church on 21?
Yeah.
The soup kitchen church. That's St. John's. The cemetery was right on their grounds. But what happened, like anybody who knows the Catholic Church, they needed to build a school. They needed to buy a rectory and all this. So they moved all the bodies. They bought a piece of land over next to where is now St. Michael's on Crittenton Street. Okay. So they reburied all the bodies.
Yeah.
And then St. Michael's said, "Well, we've grown so much." So in about 1910 or 1911, we found the last burials. They said, "We need that land now." So they moved all the bodies again. And we are tracking through all of our things where the bodies went. So we are now, when we're done, we should be able to know where all those people are from. And St. John's, may I tell people, we finished typing up the records thanks to especially one particular person in our group who is just fabulous, Kelly. We have finished writing up from 1834, before even New Jersey kept records. We can tell you if your family was Irish and Catholic in Newark and died there. We have the book of records.
Well, there was no Diocese of New Jersey until the 1850s, right? I mean,
that's correct.
Yeah, it was a part of New York, I think, the northern. Yeah. All right. So I also wanted to ask you about Woodland, because that's where I first met you. That's where a lot of people first heard about you. You got a lot of coverage for your work with Woodland. How did you get involved with Woodland? How did that start?
It started because in about I'm always in the 1800s, 1976,
hopefully
when I started my own family history, I discovered that two of my original immigrants were buried in Woodland Cemetery. My French ancestor and my Swiss ancestor were buried there. And I called the people at Woodland and asked them, tell me where they are and what information did you have, like we all do.
Yeah.
And they stonewalled me for almost 20 years. And again, being the shy person I am, I got the records from the Historical Society, or actually from a friend who got it from the Historical Society and all. And I said, well, I'll just computerize it myself, never having done this before, until I find my relative. And I did. And in 1901, discovered he died in 1901, which starts you off, of course, getting a death date finally. And he has an odd name too. Everybody laughs when they hear it. It's Guzebusch. It's French. Victor Guzebusch and his wife Marie Picaron, which is Swiss. And that's what started it. I found my relatives and I said, well, can you imagine there's got to be other people who are looking for their relatives. So we took their books, we figured out what they had done. The books were, in retrospect, after doing other cemeteries, I love Woodland. But when we were doing it, it was trying to read the handwriting, and they had an odd way of telling. They'd have 36 people in the same grave designation. Until we figured out it was because of the size of the grave, when the person was buried, and if there were certain notations that there were different places. So there really wasn't 36 people in one grave. It's just 2 people were over in this part of the cemetery, 2 of the people were in that, and the children were somewhere else. So that's what started it. Okay.
And that's a cemetery that there were a lot of problems with. Can you talk a little bit about the history of Woodland? And it had fallen by the 70s when you first became interested in it. It had fallen into disrepair.
Oh, absolutely.
It had only gotten worse over the next couple of decades, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the neighborhood. It's a tough neighborhood. When we first started working with it, it's not now as much, but back then when we started working with it, I worked with a woman called Lillian Hurd, who lived in the neighborhood, and she actually lived right on the street of Woodland, South 10th Street, and she wouldn't let me go in because it was just too dangerous. There were a lot of drug houses on one side of the cemetery, and there were gun running houses on the other side of the cemetery. So when this other woman, who I give her total credit of working with the board of Woodland, she just insisted they cut the grass because the grass was over our heads. So we couldn't go in. There were wild dogs, and this is not making things up. There were wild dogs. There were abandoned cars. I mean, there were homeless.
Dead bodies that would be found.
Dead bodies above ground. Yes, there were. So there was a lot of things. And so once it was cut down, and it's actually a beautiful cemetery, it's up on a hill, we started going in and surveying where the tombstones were and figuring out everything. But the neighborhood has changed over time. They've torn down a lot of the old rickety houses and gotten rid of some of the gun running and things. And now the neighbors looked out for us. They were very, very good to us. I still love the neighborhood. I mean, I like the people in the neighborhood. They're very good. I just wish that we could do more for them with the cemetery to give them a nicer look of what they look at. So,
I guess the board doesn't really have a lot of money for keeping the grounds up or anything.
No, they do what they can with the money that, they have to live off the interest by law. They can only work with the interest that is generated by a fund, a preservation fund. So they don't have very much money to work with. One of the board members goes down weekly and uprights stones and cuts and does what he can. But I mean, it's just not enough. Little by little, they're trying to take back the cemetery, but it's tough. It's very, very tough. So
it's probably a condition of a lot of urban cemeteries too. Yeah.
And it's full. They do have a place for graves now. They're trying to sell some graves. It's hard to sell graves when the cemetery isn't a beautiful, cut down cemetery.
Yeah. We got a question in the chat box about Woodland. Will there be any project in the future to completely document Woodland by photographing every headstone? Do you know of any?
Actually, I have probably 25,000 photographs of tombstones on my own computer.
Oh, okay.
And so anybody who ever asks me for that, I absolutely send them pictures of their headstones. We did the headstones a lot to just supplement the database. As far as Woodland is concerned, and this is something maybe not everybody does know, we are going to put Woodland's database, at least an index. You can't put the whole database, but a date, name, and maybe location. I'm not sure about location yet. we're going to put it on our website so that people can do their own searches. After 20-something years of doing it for people, we're going to give them access so that they can look things up. But if they want more information, then they still will need to contact us, because as most of these people I've helped in the past with Woodland know, my database is not a normal cemetery database. Mine is a database of a family researcher, because I have death certificates, obituaries. I have people even send me pictures of their dead people. So I have pictures sometimes of the people, and all kinds of information, family groupings. When somebody has asked me for information on their relative, I tell them it's a partnership. They will also give me information about how they're related to other people in the family plot. So I can tell them, well, this is this person's husband, and this is their children, and this is an ex-wife. He's buried with 3 wives, you know, that type of thing. Not something a normal cemetery. I mean, usually you get date, age, and name, and that's about it from a cemetery. And that makes sense. They're not in family searching business. So
so that you actually touched on my next question, is this all this information you're gathering, you're putting together, where does all this information end up?
that's the question I prepared for, because I knew people wanted to know that. It's the only question I prepared that I did have a prepared response for. Depending upon what they're doing, like right now we are typing, everybody knows, we're typing Mount Pleasant, we're typing Van Tassel, we're typing Smith and Smith Funeral Home. We've got a whole bunch, plus some of the Catholic records, although I don't think I had any of the respondents doing the Catholic records. I think I'm pretty much set on those. We're going to try to have everything as an index on our site. So anybody, you know, for all the information they are typing, not every piece of information they type, like where the person lived when they died, we can't put that all up on our website. But we are going to try to be getting permission to put all the indexes up, so that if you go in and you try to find Jacob Brown, and it will say where the person is buried or the funeral home records where they are, you can, even if we don't have all, like we don't have everything that we can give the people, they will at least know this much, that they can call that funeral home or they can call that cemetery. They know where it is, the records are now. And the funeral homes and the cemeteries are going to be thrilled, because all they have to do, we've given them all the information on a flash drive. So now they're computerized. So all they have to do is go in and they can provide all the information to the people, to the researchers.
Oh, okay. So you compile this information, you keep it, but you only put the index to it online, and then this allows, but then you also give the information back to
Right back to the people.
Cemetery, whoever, and then people can call them and get the information.
Exactly. And if they want us, you know, it depends upon, you know, certain ones like Woodland, there is nobody behind us. We are Woodland, even though we're not associated with Woodland. I always tell people I'm not on the board. I'm not part of Woodland, but I'm the only one with John Sass. We're the only ones who have the records, you know, computerized records. So you have to kind of have to come to us for that. But when you're talking about like a St. Mary's, you'll have the Catholic archdiocese or Holy Sepulchre.
There's an infrastructure there behind.
There's absolutely an infrastructure they can go to. Kathy at Holy Sepulchre constantly answers the phone all day long, helping people. But she's never been able to help anybody with St. Mary's. But now, when we're done, she will be able to, which is great.
And we actually got a question from Ray Veth. Hi, Ray.
Hi, Ray.
He asked, he wanted us to repeat the website for the Archdiocese, and Mark Zepp and my colleague Beth both responded in the chat box. It's arcancem.org. So RCANCEM.org. That's the address.
And it's easier to remember if you remember Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Newark, RCAN, SEM for cemetery, CEM.org.
Okay. Good.
And they, just so everybody knows too, only because I deal with them all the time, Holy Sepulchre is the last cemetery they're computerizing. Everything else has been computerized, but Holy Sepulchre still has tons, I mean, tens of thousands of people to still put into their database.
Yeah.
But they have 2 dedicated people who type every day, and they are uploading as fast as they can.
Yeah.
I think their goal might be the end of this year that they'll be done, but there's just so many people. It is an incredible amount of people.
Yeah, I was one of the lucky ones. They apparently covered the plot that my great-great-grandmother bought back in 1891. I had all the people from that plot, the Newark family plot.
Oh, how lucky. You're lucky.
On the Arkansas site. So.
Oh, that's great.
Including a couple of people whose names I didn't recognize.
You use that little magnifying glass then?
I think I must have. It was a while ago I looked. Yeah. Okay, so we have another question. Will the records for St. Mary's and St. John's be made available online for research? You've kind of answered that already. You said that.
Yes, but yet they will. I don't know exactly where they will be yet. I have to talk to the archdiocese. I'm hoping they're going to let us put the index on our site as well as their site, but they may not. Maybe they might say, no, we want it on our site alone. I am dealing with the IT people there, and we're working closely with them. So I really don't care if it's our site or their site, as long as people have access.
Yeah.
It is wonderful information, though. I mean, to have the St. John's 1834 is just incredible to have that. And so we just have to clean up the database a little bit before we get that finished.
And somebody also asked a question that actually touches on something I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you how people go about volunteering with your group, and somebody else did ask, how do we contact the project to ask for information, or is there a site online? But they don't really contact you. You will eventually have an index available for people on your site.
Absolutely. You can contact us through the website, our website, the njrpg.org website. Yeah. But if anybody wants to volunteer or ask for a lookup now, because some people might say, hey, can I get involved now? You can email me directly. I have told Tom that the world has my email address. There's no problem giving it to 20 more people. And I try to respond. I hope everybody realized I try to respond within 24 hours to everyone's email. Sometimes I do take a couple hours off, so it'll take just a few times I go away from my computer screen, but I will absolutely, and I hope everybody will attest to that. I try to send instructions. The way we do this is we send people a blank Excel spreadsheet. So you kind of have to be able to type into a spreadsheet. So that's probably one of the only caveats as far as being a volunteer. You need to be able to type into a spreadsheet, and I either send one photo with the email and the spreadsheet, or if there's multiple photos, like sometimes I send 50 or 60 photos at one time, we use a free transfer site called wetransfer.com, which is a great free, it's so easy.
We use it at the library all the time,
Oh yeah, I don't know what I'd do without it. And they download the pictures on their end, and then they type. And hopefully my instructions are good. I try to write them as if a kindergartner could follow them. So, thank you, Beth. And I'm just sending out this afternoon. Everybody's waiting for this new group of records. And I finished typing all the instructions out. So this afternoon after our thing, everybody better be prepared. You're going to get a whole bunch of work.
And because Mary said I could share her email, I just typed it in the chat box, mary.lish@gmail.com. Lish is her last name.
Great.
So, okay. So, and are you looking for more volunteers? You mentioned that you have a kind of a tight-knit group. So you are looking.
Well, it's a tight-knit group of our members of NJRPG, but we can always use more volunteers. We have a great group of volunteers right now, and they're from all over the country. Everybody should know. It's very interesting. We have California people, so I usually can push theirs off till a little later because they're getting up early, later than New York people. They're not all centered in New Jersey. It's Florida, Texas, Colorado, Maine. I mean, we have people from all over the country volunteering and throwing in their volunteer time.
But people with New Jersey ancestry.
Usually, yes. Yeah, that's how they've gotten to me to start with, is through their New Jersey ancestors. And, if I can help, I say this very quietly, but if somebody does need some advice or help, our group, as I said, we have a couple of three professional genealogists, and I can always tap them for advice. Two of them do it for a living, so they can't donate their services. They actually, this is what they live by. We have a couple of registered nurses, which helps us with those causes of death, which everybody knows how they've been the bane of my existence, knowing how to spell arteriosclerosis for the 30th time.
Yeah. Especially with the handwriting on a form.
Oh, God. It's just, and they love to abbreviate things too.
Yeah.
But we have a lawyer, we have DNA experts, it's just a whole bunch of people. But I will try to help somebody who's run up against a wall with their genealogy. I'm the least, and I say this humbly, but I am probably the least accredited of the researchers. Our group is incredible. One of the people that you may have known, Tom, years ago, I don't know if you did know him, one member of our group, I should mention two other members of our group. One was Bob McAvoy. Do you remember Bob?
I don't think I met him, but I've heard the name. Yeah.
Bob McAvoy wrote the book, the tome of the Civil War dead in New Jersey.
Okay.
And unfortunately, Bob passed away right before we were going to have a big dinner together and all. So, but he still is, between him and one other gentleman I deal with on a daily basis, really documented the Civil War people and where they're buried in New Jersey. And I met him through Woodland. I was helping him with the Civil War in Woodland, and now in all the other cemeteries. And one of our other members who maybe people won't know him by name, but they certainly know his website, is Glenn Geisheimer from oldnewark.com.
Oldnewark.com, sure.
And he's also the webmaster for our NJRPG. He's the one who put the site up. And Glenn and I are on almost a daily, I see Beth's positive note, but Glenn and I are on either a daily or a couple times a week. We're constantly with each other talking about, what to do on our website and how to put, I keep pushing. I want more and more put up on our website. We're about to put up St. Stephen's German Lutheran Church. I know it's at Family Search, but it's not indexed. Well, we indexed that group of funerals, and I just found out there's some more that we can do. So we're going to be continuing doing the St. Stephen's.
That's the Church in the Ironbound where Ferry and Wilson come together?
Yes, exactly. It's St. Stephen's. Okay. And it's called Grace Community Church, I think, now. But the old records are quite, they're I can't remember when the funeral started, but one of our volunteers, and a lot of it was written in German. The causes of death were written in German, who the survivors were written in German. And luckily, one of my volunteers is sitting in Germany, Birgit. And she did all our German translations.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And she also can read Old German, which I don't know if any of the volunteers know or the participants know. Not a lot of people read Old German anymore. It's a dying language, and Birgit's grandfather taught her how to read it. So she's been a wonderful source for that information. And the St. Stephen's records, if anybody doesn't know, they are with the Family Search. You can go to the library. I have them on my computer. But in their marriage records, they list where in Germany the people came from. So we're going to start
Oh,
typing
that's
that up
useful
from
information for a lot of people.
1874. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's
yeah.
going to be a great source of information for people.
I just wanted to mention a couple of comments that we got in the chat box. One question for you. Will Fairmount Cemetery be indexed? Are you working with Fairmount at all?
Not yet.
Mhm.
I will, and I hesitate to tell people this. None of you will tell anybody, right?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, as long as we keep it among ourselves. I do
Okay.
have Fairmount's records.
Oh,
I
okay.
have photographed personally. A couple of people in my group and me, we have photographed their records.
Mhm.
I want to approach Fairmount because they are computerized from about 1935 on. But anything from the old, when they opened in 1855, Fairmount opened in 1855 to about 1935, they are not computerized. So it's a matter of going to books and fighting and things like that. And I would like to do that, or work with them and see if we can get it. If we are able to do that, we will have accomplished, we're going to have almost every cemetery in Newark, which is a huge metropolis, as you know.
Yeah.
Hundreds
Lots
of
of cemeteries.
thousands of people. Fairmount alone has, I think they have 160 to 200,000 burials,
My
about
goodness.
the same as Holy Sepulchre. So it's an incredible, when you have one or two people in an office, that's a big undertaking to try to get that computerized. But I am going to talk to them. I should tell you that my group told me they will ban me from the group if I take another project on until we finish we have. They literally will not talk to me anymore. If I get another project agreed to, they won't talk to me. So we have to finish what we have first.
Somebody else made a comment. Jewish Genealogy Group did the Newark, New Jersey Jewish cemeteries, and and a new project in synagogue plaques, and it's on jewishgen.org. Somebody had made that comment. I just wanted to point that out. You're not really working with any Jewish cemeteries, are you?
Well, actually, we have all the records from the Newark Jewish cemeteries.
Oh, okay.
I got an email from someone yesterday or the day before from someone I didn't know, but evidently she's with the Morris County site, telling me that Alice, I think her name was Gould. I think it was, somebody can correct me if they will. Alice, I think her name was Gould, wrote a book about Jewish cemeteries. But I think Alice has retired. And so she gave the book, all her records to someone, and that someone gave us all their records. So I think basically, and please don't quote me on the Jewish sites because I'm not as familiar yet. I have a listing of all the Jewish cemeteries, and within each Jewish cemetery, people probably don't know this, but there are individual cemeteries within the big enclave. For instance, on Grove Street or on McClellan, it's one cemetery, well, sort of, but there might be 12 synagogues represented within. So it's a different setup, which we're learning now. The one thing they did not do is map the cemetery. And that's something that we have done for other cemeteries like Woodland. There are no maps for Woodland. We created maps by just walking it and documenting where the stones are and things like that. So when we get to the Jewish cemetery project, which is on our list, it just came in late.
Yeah.
It will probably be more of a mapping and tombstone issue with that. But they're right. Whoever it was that put in the thing, the Jewish Gen has a write-up. I don't know how good or how complete it is. I assume it's good, but we've got the records in it. At some point, I will look in the box at what we have.
So one of my colleague Beth, who you know, said she was given to transcribe what looks like state records. Can you talk about where those are from?
Ask her what?
Could you, Beth, if you want to turn your sound on?
Yeah.
The ones I just got were like hospital, or like it's a Department of Vital Statistics, I thought. And it was different cemeteries.
No. It probably, maybe it was funeral home. Could it be a funeral home? Did it look like a death certificate almost?
Yes. Oh, okay. So that's what it is. It's yeah. It said Department of Vital Statistics on the top, so it's probably from a funeral home. Okay.
It's from a funeral home, and actually it's rather late, the ones they have, which is nice because it's easy to type from a type thing. A lot of people don't realize that the funeral homes are the people who give the state information for death certificates. So they make up kind of a dummy death certificate before and give it to the state, who does produce a true death certificate. So the funeral home that you're typing, Beth, right now, and a lot of people probably are aware of it, they're all probably saying, yeah, I did those too. Some of them were handwritten early on. The later ones that we have right now, they actually put it on a form that looks like a death certificate. That's why you thought it was a state record, but it's not. It's actually a funeral home record.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And as somebody, Randy Patrick, made a comment, burial societies. I think that might have been in reference to the Jewish.
The Jewish, yes.
Yeah. So they're divided into burial societies. Is that?
Thank you, Randy, for clarifying. I may be saying that wrong about the Jewish. They're burial society, and aren't they? I think they're also synagogues. So I've seen it, certain synagogues, some burial societies, unless the burial society is within the synagogue. I need to be educated on this. So I do need to talk to some people in the Jewish community so they educate me on Jewish burials.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we've talked, I think I had all these questions and we've kind of gone back and forth in a more casual way than I expected to. I think I've asked all my questions, but what is the biggest project you're working on right now? What are you looking forward to the most?
Right now, I would say the biggest project, and I had to write out all my projects because I keep forgetting what all of them.
I actually have a list. You sent me a list. Can I share that list with the group?
Of course you can. I hope I put everything on the list because I added one in handwriting this morning I forgot about.
So I'll share my screen.
Read them out.
And let's just bring it up. So that's the list. Right?
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. And I let me see if I can scroll down here. Right. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. Yes. So there's your list. NJRPG, what we have done, what we are doing, and will do. So you finished Clinton and Woodland.
And actually, you can move two more up there. The defunct, which is under cemeteries, projects in process. The defunct one and the Newark City Cemetery, Pottersfield, we're putting that in our finished projects, but it's continually updating because we're constantly adding to that.
So can you talk a little bit about Newark City Cemetery? Because that's a cemetery with an interesting background too. And it's like Woodland, it's had kind of a
checkered past.
Checkered past, yes.
Yeah. Newark City Cemetery, and I'm not the owner of this one. This is a project one of our other members, Margie Ewan, took on. She is going to try to populate that cemetery with burials. And what I mean by that is there is no listing of burials for that cemetery. And they have, I don't even know how many burials. They may have 80,000, from the city's poor. It's been open since and I may be wrong on this. That's where I didn't prepare a note about that, but it could be from like the 1850s is my guess. And then it moved the site, but they used to take people in from the almshouses and basically the indigent, but also just people who weren't connected to anyone. We had a lot of immigrants to Newark who came, and because of pandemics and sickness, they died. They didn't have relatives. They didn't buy a cemetery plot, so they would be buried in Potter's Field, just the same as New York and all. But the problem with it is, over time, the city did not take care of Potter's Field. They didn't cut it down. They didn't and it became a junkyard, which is really sad, very
toxic
sad.
Waste dump too, right?
Oh, terrible.
Yeah.
So back in, and I can't remember, maybe it was the 2000s, somehow we got it cleaned up. Agnes Wolf, the one that worked with me on Woodland, she was a good lady. She got the city to clean it up, created a beautiful monument. It was nice. And I understand it's back to being a dump again, which is just a shame. But while this was going on, they tried bringing lawsuits to get lists of burials. No one said they had the list of burials. I have one source in the back pocket right now that I'm going to try to see if I can find something. I'm approaching funeral homes to see if they can help me put together who they buried in city cemetery. But as people find their own family members, or as during their research, you run across death certificates all the time that say city cemetery, we ask them to send them to Margie, and she will populate and it'll go up on our line. And we're hoping to get a better list of who actually is buried in city cemetery.
Okay. So we've had a couple of questions about that list that you put together of your projects, and they would like me to email them that list to them. If people in the program today give me their emails,
that would be fine, or they can just go on the website. It's on the website.
Oh, okay.
It's on the website, and it's more up to date probably.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
njrpg.org then, right?
Right, and I think the heading says something about projects, and it's almost in the same format that I sent to Glenn. And I don't know if on that there's certain little projects we're doing, like the St. Stephen's in the Ironbound. We also got our hands on the St. Benedict's funeral home book. And it was written all in Latin. So we're good in Latin. So one of our members also translated a lot of the Latin, and we did a lot of the German in it. The problem is a lot of Newark was German, and so we have German monks writing in Latin. So the handwriting is, incredible. One very quick story, if we have time. I don't want to.
Absolutely.
St. Mary's Cemetery in East Orange. You mentioned that. I didn't talk about it. St. Mary's Cemetery is on the East Orange Newark border, and it was started as the St. Mary's German Catholic Cemetery. And this is the one that there were no records for. That's why Kathy at Holy Sepulchre couldn't help people, because she just had a smattering of records. Well, there was a book, and I swear it's called the Book of the Dead. I mean, it's just one of those names. And it is 75 years of burials from St. Mary's. And the whole thing is in Latin. And it's written by the German monks. Well, I'm telling you, I was using words I haven't used all my life when I was reading that book. We translated 75 years of Latin burials from St. Mary's. So that's in our but it is also why our records for St. Mary's are not done yet. We have a lot of matching up of tombstones and the database to marry them, because sometimes the writing was so bad that Smith became Jones. I mean, it was really, the names were so different. So we have a long way to go with St. Mary's, but we'll get there. Yeah.
I've looked through some German church records from St. Peter's German Church in St. Peter's German Catholic Church in Newark, which is no longer in existence. But I was looking through their records once, and they have, one of the things that I ran into is that when you have the German names are given, like I knew my great-grandfather's name as Charles, but he was presented as Carl. Yeah, and you see these like Germanized versions of names. You don't always know the right person you're looking for. You have to kind of
Or the good one is Hieronymus.
Who is that?
Jerome.
Oh, God.
So if you ever find a Hieronymus.
I don't have any Jeromes in my family. I don't think. Yeah, it's not that I've encountered yet. This has been great, Mary. Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who participated. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us, and I hope you get some volunteers out of this experience.
Wonderful.
And it's wonderful that you're doing this work, and I hope that you're able to continue it for a long time. We're getting some thank yous. And Joan also put a link to the list of projects on the NJPRPG website. Actually,
thank you. And may I take 10 seconds?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you to all of you. This is the time I get emotional. I'm telling you, these volunteers are the best people in the world. They really, truly are. So thank you all for helping us. We really appreciate it. That's all. I just need to say thank you. It is, they do so
Yeah, well,
much
a
work.
lot of people are thanking you, and thank you for your work and for doing this. This is really valuable work. You're basically, I mean, we had a discussion on email. You didn't think you were preserving records, but you are. You're preserving the info. You're maybe not preserving the paper records themselves, but you're preserving the information. You're bringing the information that's in them.
We hope so that it's never lost.
A form
And
of
the
preservation.
and everybody in our group, the NJRPG group, there's such a good group of people, except for Glenn, you know, but our webmaster, I mean, he does this and he just does it for us. I mean, he's just great. All of the members. If I say one member, I will forget somebody else, so I don't want to do that. But between Dan and most people know Dan because they send all their work to Dan. I'm shipping. I send out the work and they send it back to Dan, so they know Dan's name. But Dan and Kelly and Margie and Pat, I mean, they're all, Tom, Catherine, they're all just wonderful people. They really are.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mary. And thank you for everybody else for taking part in our program today. So remember, New Jersey Records Preservation Group, the website is njrpg.org, New Jersey Records Preservation Group, or you can email Mary at mary.lish@gmail.com. So that's our program for today. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. Bye now, everyone.
Thanks, Mary.
You're welcome, Tom. Bye now.